Tom Bartlett. I am a myasthenia gravis patient. I am an advocate within the community, so I do a lot of different work helping patients understand. And I'll leave that as a dot, dot, dot because there's so many facets about understanding. But I work with the MGFA. I'm a national patient ambassador for research in the MG registry. I am involved with a number of the pharmas and biotechs that are creating therapies for MG. I work with a lot of folks out there and trying to build a better understanding within the patient community. As a result, I work on a program with one of the pharmas that allows me to speak directly one-on-one with some MG patients. I've probably spoken to about 30 or so of them, and so they get a chance to talk to another patient who, in many cases, have experience, like me, have experienced what they're going through. And we don't give them answers about medication or anything, but we just guide them along that process. What allows me to do a lot of that, besides being sick with MG, um, my prior world that I lived in was in life science consulting. I headed up global sales for a life science consulting firm in the Boston area. So I got to talk to all the farmers and biotechs and startups and globals and trying to understand what did they want to achieve with their science. And most of the time it was in terms of development. We were in the research side of the thing, business, but ultimately leads to a new therapy coming to market. And anytime they could reduce time to bringing a new therapy to market, it had multiple effects, including helping patients like me with a rare disease, but also it says, hey, we can take 2 years off of development. That's revenue. So my job was to help understand the mix between the science and the business side of it, and helping them make good decisions with us at my former consulting firm. But this is where MG jumped in. I was diagnosed in 2019. I had a situation where I was on a business trip with a major hospital in New York. And I looked in the mirror the morning when I'm in my hotel room, and my right eye is pointing straight up. And my eyelid is drooped halfway down across my eye. And I'm like, well, that's not good. This is not a good situation. So I call my PCP, and they're like, well, can you come in right away? And I'm like, no, I'm in New York. I got business. I got things to do. I'll be back in a couple days. I'll come see you then, which is what I did. And I went in and talking to the nurse practitioner, she said, I'll be right back. And then she brought in the head of the practice. And I said, well, that's usually not a good thing. And subsequently, they run a number of tests on me, and they did an MRI of my brain looking for things, but they ran a number of blood tests, and my PCP was aware enough to run a blood test for myasthenia gravis, AChR positive, which I had found out later on, 5 years later, which was incredibly unusual. So I'm extraordinarily grateful for him to have the wherewithal, the knowledge, based on my symptoms, to run a blood test for MG. So that was my introduction. He called me at 10 o'clock at night. I've known him for nearly 30 years, and he said, Tom, you have myasthenia gravis. And I'm like, cool, what's that? Never heard it. And so that was like the beginning of this. I don't want to call it a journey. I like journeys to be fun, but this is a journey of enlightenment in a lot of ways. Personal enlightenment, but also enlightenment within the rare disease community. That made me passionate about applying my knowledge and from my background. I worked at companies like Apple and Dell for 20 years between the two of them. I had some pretty acute knowledge in terms of technology than when I worked for the consulting firm as it applies to science. So I felt obligated really to say, how can I help? Because I want to help myself, hopefully improve my quality of life, but also help others because it is a scary, scary world that we live in. And for those who don't know about myasthenia, I call it an insidious disease because you look at me on camera and I look great, and well, I think I look great. Um, but look at me probably about 8:30 this morning. I could barely walk. So the disease sucks the life out of our ability to do things by affecting our muscles, and it's actually something called a neuromuscular junction. Our antibodies go in and kill receptors that receive a chemical signal that says, go do something. So our brain is firing away and it's producing these chemicals, acetylcholine, and on our muscles are these little receptors. I call them baseball gloves. I used to play baseball for 20 years, and it was an analogy that I could understand. And the gloves are no longer there. My immune system kills, and that's the word that you'll read about, it kills those receptors. And depending on the severity, if you're killing a lot of them, like me, I become extraordinarily weak, even with the therapies that I'm on, especially in my legs, but my voice, my facial expressions. At the end of the day, the left side of my face will droop pretty dramatically. My right eye will droop. So you're affecting uh, significantly. But one of the muscles that we are always aware of is our diaphragm. That's a major muscle, and it's also the one that allows us to breathe. And not too far in the distant past, maybe 50 years or so, there were no therapies that were developed for MG. They were treating it with existing therapies, and the mortality rate was pretty high, relatively speaking. If you go back another 50 years or so, mortality rate was above 75% with those being diagnosed or living with MG. So it's pretty scary, very scary in terms of living with this neuromuscular disease. Uh, there are others that are out there, and we think about the world that we live in today, where there are a number of therapies today that are FDA approved, and I can consider myself extraordinarily lucky. That's something that I want to continue to understand because I'd like that luck to continue. I don't really call it luck. It's really, I'm lucky that there are people out there doing this, but my way I look at things is my hope and faith are in people and in science. So I look at science and I hope that they continue to do this incredible job and seeing things that we can't see and providing a methodology to improve our lives. And I learned a lot about the rare disease community over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's a theme that I hear that we're, even though we have this awful disease, one is not worse than the other because it affects us at a very personal level. Um, the fact that myasthenia gravis has a few therapies, which is wonderful, but we still need more. I look at other states or conditions that are out there, and I can see some of the hope from where the science is going to, and I have faith in all of those people. I have faith in people that are going to bring a better life to all of us that are suffering with rare diseases. It's going to take a while, but I think we're pointed in the right direction. And when I use insidious, diabolical could be another word that describes what we go through because the I am the anomaly. I went in to see my PCP. He made some recognitions on what's happening and was able to run a blood test. So I went in, and within a week, I had a diagnosis. Um, Many people, I don't want to put a number to it, but it is well over 50% of the people out there will wait years for a diagnosis. And that is heartbreaking. One of the things that they incur is because there are variations of MG that are not detected by a blood test. I was fortunate that my version was detected by a blood test, but there are a number of other versions that are not. And they are denied the respect that they are sick because a blood test did not find anything, or it's finding a very rare occurrence of it, so they have to double, triple, quadruple check. And a lot of cases, and I know these people personally that were directed to like having conversion disorder, having FND. I heard a new one, and I've forgotten what the terminology is, but it was the idea of you're making this up. There's a medical term for that, and they struggle. They struggle with all of that, and they will go years before they get a diagnosis that says, yes, you are sick, and this is what you're sick with. It's really hard for those folks, and I have great sympathy for them for what they have to go through. For me, and as you probably have read, that it's considered the snowflake disease. I'm not really keen on that identity, but it's the idea that each individual has a unique presentation of symptoms for myasthenia. For me, I can talk to, I get extreme fatigue in my legs, weakness in my legs. I struggle at times walking up and down stairs. My phone has sent me a notification that my walking steadiness is low and you're at risk of falling in the next period of time. And that's frightening. You get a notice from your notification from your phone, but you have nobody to give it to. So then you go on and say, oh, for me, I have poor problems with my right eye. I call it's a perpetual fishhook in the corner of my right eye, pulling my right eye 24/7. My eyelid droops, but it's not as bad. So, if we're talking, it'll be hard for you to discern whether my eyelid is drooping. And other folks, their eyelid is completely closed, or both eyelids are completely closed. We are affected by double vision. So these are things that are not good if you're trying to do a job that requires some precise vision, or even driving a car. I know my eyes do get tired when I'm driving, um, and I have to be very aware of that. And I do get double vision, but it's subtle. I, I wear these glasses. These are CVS specials, 1X. And I do that to kind of enlarge the letters just enough so that they're not blurry to me. In the past, I had extraordinary vision. I relied upon it, not knowing, as I had a 2010 vision. And then when it went to 2010 or 2030, whatever it is today, um, to me, it's like looking through a window that's full of mist, because that's not my norm. Other things, other symptoms that people will have is in the cold or in the heat of summer, we will struggle with the symptoms being um, exacerbated. So, especially in the heat of summer, where the fatigue will elevate during that period of time, but it's the breathing that can be struggling. I spoke to a gentleman not too long ago. He lives in the southern United States, and he was out just doing some work on a Saturday in his yard, not heavy work, but he's newly diagnosed. And it's that understanding of your body, and he didn't understand that working in plus 90-degree heat and is going to be dangerous. And he passed out, and he was taken to the emergency room, and they stabilized him. But these are things that you don't know. What is the severity of your symptoms? It's not it's my legs, other limbs. So I know a gentleman um, in a professional state used to deliver a lot of presentations. In the days you would print out your slides, and he was just carrying a handful of paper, and his arms gave out. All the paper just dropped out, and he did not understand why. And so he was more effective with his arms and his hands and be able to grip things. And now he's been diagnosed for 25 years. And that's the thing. It's incurable and it's chronic. It's not going to go away. The therapies are helpful and we're all thankful for them, but they don't cure it. So we continue to live with these symptoms as I do. This morning. I struggled walking, and tomorrow morning I'll go for an infusion, and hopefully that will give me a little help. Then I get another one, then I get another one, then I get another one, then I pause for 3 weeks and start it all over again. So the symptoms can vary. And one of the other symptoms I want to mention too is the idea of fatigue as it affects our ability to think. I'm not a big fan of the term brain fog. I think it's too arbitrary. I call it lack of clarity when I really struggle thinking. And in my world, um, in the world of science, you can't find replacement words all the time. So it's very, very frustrating. And it's also to the point where not being able to think of the right word, but being able to articulate the word. So now your ability to speak becomes impacted, where you'll start saying a word almost as if you have a stroke, but you can't finish the word. So those are the things that can drive you nuts, because tomorrow I'll get my infusion and Friday I'll have hopefully a decent day. But I still have this scenario that it's not a fix, it's a help, and we just go to the next day. That is what it's really interesting right now, because our first FDA approved therapy was in 2017 by a company called Alexion, and they came out with a specific approach to treating MG, and it was helpful. And so since then, a couple other companies have come out with an alternative approach to treating MG. And now we're trying to figure out which approach is going to give us the most improvement. But the things that are really interesting to me are looking at where the future lies. But there's a lot of genetic research going on. There are no specific biomarkers that have been identified, genetic biomarkers, but they're getting close. And the idea is then if you've got a biomarker and you can find out where in your DNA is being affected, can they alter or do a gene insertion kind of thing, maybe in the next 5, 10 years? That's not going to happen tomorrow. But that's the hope, that there are really smart people out there doing some really great work that's out there. And the world I was thinking of is there's companies looking at nanoparticles as well to treat MG, which they're doing in other types of diseases. But they're finding really interesting and creative ways to treat MG. And that's where the hope is. So those are the things that are fascinating. They're going to take a long time. The drugs that we have available are good. We always want better. We're not satisfied as patients. I will not say, "Ooh, that's good," and I'm living at 65% of my life that I used to have. And I guess that's just being a little stubborn. but I want to get back to where I was. And I may not get there, but I hope the things that I do can help other people get there maybe 10, 20 years from now. That would be great. I think the best thing is if anybody's watching this, both as a patient, a caregiver, even as a healthcare provider, or whomever is associated within this world of myasthenia, it is about hope, and it's about the great work that's being done out there in the scientific community and the passion that they all have working in the rare disease community, because MG is not the only disease state that they work in. The first year was really, really hard to consume. I was a very physical person. I played a lot of sports at that time. I was traveling a lot. I could go on 4 hours of sleep and go from one city to the next city and never bothered me until. And so that's where we are right now for MG. We have a number of therapies that are FDA approved. There are more that are coming out. There's a large investment being made by some of the larger global pharmaceutical companies, and that's what I would tell people. It's going to take a while, but keep that hope up. Keep doing the good things, and the good things are be cognizant of your body, understand your body, cognizant of your diet. Those things can be helpful as well, and just keep a smile on your face and keep moving forward in life. We just
Yeah.
started our fundraising season. June is MG Awareness Month. So if you're in Boston, you'll see the Zakin Bridge lit up in teal blue. And there are a number of other cities around the country that are having their transportation ways. Some of them are bridges, some of them buildings lit up in teal blue. We just had a walk in Boston. We have another one, I think, in New York City next month in June. And there's going to be one in Tampa a little bit later this year. So it's the MGFA does a great job in terms of creating and spreading the awareness programs, and I'm really supportive of what they do.